Hey everybody, and welcome to Healthy Living. My guest today is Ryan Andrews. Ryan Andrews is a registered dietitian who completed his education in exercise and nutrition at the University of Northern Colorado, Kent State University, and Johns Hopkins Medicine. You might have seen him in Muscle and Fitness, Men's Health, Rodelli, Organic Life, oh I pronounced that right, Greatest, Precision Nutrition, BuzzFeed, and Veg News. Ryan likes to spend time volunteering with organic farms and organizations that prevent food from being wasted. Very good. And he's also the author of this book that I found and absolutely loved called Drop the Fat Act and Live Lean. And we're going to talk about his book today. But first, I want to welcome you to Healthy Living. Thanks, Ryan. I met you years ago. I don't know why it's taken me 5 years to talk to you, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm really grateful that you contacted me. I remember meeting you back at a
Veg Fest in
Denver, Colorado.
And I heard you speak, and I really liked you. And by then, I had already found your book. And what's interesting is I came across this book because I'm guessing it's published by Book Publishing Company, right?
Yep.
And so Bob had it at the table, and it was very reasonably priced. I love the title, Drop the Fat Act. But what got me to buy the book, and there's something that you just told me today, which we're going to say, which will get a lot of people to buy it, is I opened the book just because, you do that sometimes. And I've got a lot of things in here, but you have cartoons in here. And I love cartoons, but this is what got me to buy the book. So the first page I opened, chapter 2, I don't know if people can see it. It's a cartoon, but it's ostensibly a doctor talking to an overweight female patient. And the quote is, "It's partially glandular and partially 8,500 calories per day." And I just said, any book that's going to make me laugh this much, I'm going to get. But I just found out from you today that you actually donate all the proceeds to this book. Tell us about where, because if people don't buy it just for that reason, that's wonderful. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I donate half of all of my proceeds, the author's proceeds, to hunger relief efforts and school lunch programs.
That is really awesome. Yeah. I didn't know that. I bought a few copies as gifts, but now it's really going to move up as far as gift copies. Because thank you for doing that. Because that's really what we had chatted a little bit before the show, and because I said, can people get a consult with you? And you said, well, maybe, but because you're doing more now with kids and things like that. So before we get into the book, which I can't wait to do, talk a little bit about what you're doing now and really who you are, because I don't think a lot of my viewers, unless they've seen you speak at the Veg Fest, are really familiar with you or your work.
Yeah. I'll give a little bit of a background. Hopefully I don't ramble too much off course. So I've been working with a company called Precision Nutrition the last 10 years. And I've been doing a lot of online nutrition coaching for people. That's been a bulk of what I do, along with writing projects and presenting and some media events and things like that. But I have loved Precision Nutrition. They are a forward-thinking company with great people that challenge me and support me, and I've really enjoyed working with them. Before that, my path to kind of my current beliefs and training and all that stuff started when I was 14. I took a weightlifting class in high school and learned about Arnold Schwarzenegger and received his encyclopedia for Christmas, and I became hooked just in the world of fitness and along with that nutrition. Like the idea that I could change my exercise and my eating and change my body was this empowering thing I had never learned of, because my family was not unhealthy, but it just wasn't something on our radar. So very early in my teens, I learned about it. I really got serious into competitive bodybuilding in my late teens, so late high school, early college. So that was really my life. And anybody who has met or lived with or talked to a competitive bodybuilder, it's a very, I hate to say selfish, but everything revolves around you. You have meals that are timed out for the day, and you're training twice a day, and you tan and you pose and you have to sleep and you're always sore. So it's a lifestyle that's very self-absorbed. And at the time it was great. It taught me a lot about exercise and nutrition. But it started to feel a little bit uncomfortable to me, and like, I got to maybe spend more time away from everything revolving around me. And so that's when I got more serious about school and pursuing my RD credential and grad school and all that stuff. So that's kind of the path. And I will also mention that during graduate school, when I was 22, so about 13 years ago, I was taking an ethics and research class. And that really changed the path of how I look at food. because we were learning about using animals in research, and I had never thought about that before. And I thought, gosh, I'm not really comfortable with this. And I was talking to a lab assistant one day, and she said, well, do you eat meat and animal products? I said, well, yeah, I come from bodybuilding, like all the time, a lot of it. And she said, well, you're involving animals every day in your lifestyle just by making those choices. And that was an epiphany for me. And it sounds strange to say that because I was 22 years old. Like I should have thought about that by now, but I didn't. So that was like the curtain being pulled back. And from that age onward, I've looked at food through a different lens, just about when I make a food choice, what else is involved with it, whether it's animals or farmers or the environment and my health, but just kind of the full picture rather than just my biceps and my abs and that type of thing.
Right. Well, I love what you said. It almost sounds like that could be another book for you, like how you got to be where you are and the way you're looking at it. Because what you said is so true. People don't believe that you really can change your body in a profound, positive way just by, even if people didn't want to exercise, which I think they should, but just by changing the food. You may not know this, but I used to weigh 200 pounds, and I don't. And when you are at a weight maybe you're not happy with, a lot of times you don't believe that it's possible, but it is. And you look really good. I mean, maybe you're not competitive bodybuilding now, but you look like you could be on TV on one of those shows. You look like you're in really good shape, so fantastic.
Right.
So you're welcome. So what made you write this book called Drop the Fat Act and Live Lean, and what inspired you to write this particular book? Are a lot of the people that you've worked with at Precision Nutrition struggling with their weight? Was this something that was always interesting to you to help people? Because this is my passion. I run a program called the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, but I didn't run the program until I got lean. I mean, I don't think you ever probably had a weight problem, but you studied this, and the book is so amazing because it's like everything that I say, and maybe not exactly the same way, but it's like, yes, 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 yes. And we're going to go over the chapters. So you really understand this problem, even though you may not have been overweight yourself, but you really kind of, and before we go into it, let's just get it out and open now, because some people may be offended because the word fat is used a lot. Was that an issue with you or your publisher? Because I understand why you use it, and if they don't read the book, they may not, but some people are offended. It's a very charged word, fat. I think fat is more accurate than just saying overweight, because I always think of, like, I travel every week, and if my bag weighs 51 pounds, they say, oh, excuse me, your bag is overweight. They don't say your bag is over fat, but it is a word that has a negative connotation. People don't like the word, and I hope that won't keep them from reading this excellent book. But talk a little bit about why you chose that word, because it's used in the heading of every chapter. So I want to get that out now, because if somebody's offended, they'll be offended, and they'll miss out reading a great book.
Yeah, I mean, for people who know me, it was definitely never meant to be a dig or a negative judgment on somebody's choices in their life or anything like that. To me, it just seemed more honest and authentic, just in kind of how I viewed what was happening with nutrition in the United States. I mean, in not only working with clients and reading research and observing society, I hear so many kind of stuffy textbook BMI, overweight, and kind of these robotic things, and it felt, I don't know, it didn't resonate with me. So the idea of just being more casual with it and saying fat just seemed okay to me. It was never meant to be like, I want to upset these people, or I'm going to make a dig at these people, and I don't. There's nothing. It's just a statement of a body size, and that's about it. So.
Again, I think it's, I talk about this a lot in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, but there's, I used to attend, even though I'm Jewish, I used to attend a non-denominational church run by a man named the Reverend O.C. Smith. He was a singer in the 60s. He had a big hit called God Didn't Make Little Green Apples, and he always would tell this story about a lady, an overweight lady who was driving down a 2-lane country road. And as she was driving one way, a man drove the other way, rolled his window down, and he goes, "Pig!" And so she rolls her window down and goes, "Asshole!" And then she runs over a pig. And so the idea so sometimes words are how we feel about ourselves, because right? I mean, but it's one of those words, because I've heard some of the plant-based doctors use this word a lot, and even go out like this saying, that's why some of you are fat. And, but I'm just putting it out there because I want to be sensitive, because I was fat for 52 years, and I knew I was fat, and it couldn't hurt my feelings if you call me fat. I knew I was fat, but it does anyway, enough about that, because it's a great book, and I love it, and we're going to talk about it if you don't mind, because every chapter you have like a little bit of a heading. And well, the first one, the introduction, is you could take actually every heading, and that's like the plan. I mean, seriously, like almost you don't have to. I recommend people do read the book, but if we were to just put every outline of every heading, that's it. That's the reason people are fat or overweight. And in the introduction, you say fat is what fat does. So what does that mean? Just, and you can just briefly touch on each of these chapters. You don't have to give everything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of lays out why I wrote the book and what led to me writing the book in that introduction. And I started making observations when I was working with clients back when I first started personal training, just one-on-one, early in college. Mm-hmm. And I just started to notice some patterns in behavior choices that people made. I thought nothing at first. I was like, oh, whatever. Oh, interesting. It happened again and again and again. And over time, I just started noticing these same patterns, and I started working my first real job after my graduate degree at a weight management center. All I did was help with weight management, mm-hmm. with nutrition and exercise. And I got to a point where I could really predict with about 90% accuracy how somebody was living each day before they would even tell me. So it wasn't, I mean, every so often you might have a rarity for some reason, but for the most part, it was these repeated things over and over again. I knew how they were eating, what they were eating, their sleep patterns, their movement patterns, who they were spending time with, and all the things I talk about in each chapter. It was just these patterns over and over again. And so it just started to be this kind of equation, like, oh, this plus this equals that. All right, it seems kind of like pretty obvious. So I started to jot down notes and came up with all these different kind of specific chapter headers, and it led to the formation of the introduction and ultimately the book.
I love it because even though, like I said, you've never been overweight, you've worked with so many people that have, that you were able to ascertain a lot of this, because are these people out there that are weight loss experts that not only have never been overweight, but never have even worked with an overweight person. And so I think it's great. It's sort of like that old saying, stupid is what stupid does. I think that was Forrest Gump. It's kind of like fat is what fat does. And I don't do consults anymore, private consults, but when I used to, I would send a 40 questionnaire form to the person, and they'd send it back. And I honestly, just by the way they answered a few of their questions, I could almost guess their weight. Like I could say, okay, this person's going to be 200 and 300 pounds just based on one of the questions, like how many servings of fresh fruits and vegetables do you eat all day? So excellent. So chapter 1 starts with fat people skip breakfast and make dinner their largest meal. And I have interviewed lots of doctors on this show that say we're supposed to have breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper.
Yes. I mean, there's kind of a group of intermittent fasters who would probably disagree with this chapter title right now. And there's probably a case to be made for periodic fasting in certain situations. But it's a pattern I just saw over and over again. And it really just illustrates a bigger cycle that people get into, I think, with eating, where they get into kind of this restriction and diet mindset. And they say, all right, I'm starting the day and I'm going to be good. And I'm going to limit my calorie intake. And so they skip breakfast, or they have coffee, or they have just something that's pathetic. It's not much food.
Right.
And then, lunch rolls around and they're starting to feel a little bit ravenous, and maybe they kind of hold it together. And then by the time they get to the evening meal, it just becomes this train wreck. And by that time, your appetite is so strong, you can't make any choices that align with your values. And it just becomes this kind of out of control eating event. And then you eat to a point where you're so full that it kind of just continues into the next day, where you don't feel that great in the morning, you're overly full and uncomfortable, plus you feel kind of bad, so you want to limit your calories again, and it just keeps going and going and going, to where you're chronically undereating, but then there are these short bursts of time where you're acutely overeating and your body's just holding on to everything, and you just gain weight over time.
Right. It's interesting because the first thing you said is that they think they're being good, and I always try to get the people I work with to get that word out of their vocabulary when it comes to eating, because you're not good if you eat kale and you're not bad if you eat a cookie. But if your diet doesn't include cookies, you're either compliant or non-compliant. It has nothing to do with being good or bad. So I'd love to work with you, because I think we are so much on the same page. And it's funny when you talked about intermittent fasting, because I went to the school of Dr. Ellen Goldhammer. That's a technique he uses, but it's not the first thing he uses when somebody's 300 pounds. That's a technique he uses when somebody like a fashion model is 3 pounds away from goal weight. But my understanding is intermittent fasting doesn't necessarily have to be skipping breakfast. I know people, like an elderly couple, that just eat like a big breakfast, a pretty medium lunch, and don't eat dinner, but they're 80 and they really don't need it. So where do you stand on eating when hungry? Because my feeling is that no one could have ever been overweight if they ate outside the demands of true hunger. And so I'm not necessarily for or against breakfast, but I'm against calling it breakfast. Well, it is still breakfast, so you're breaking the fast, but my feeling is eat when hungry. And if my husband wakes up at 6 and is hungry at 7, I wake up at 6 and I'm not hungry till 11. So where do you stand on eat? Because there are plans that say you have to eat these timed meals, and I'm thinking I would go crazy if I had to eat every 3 hours when I'm not, especially when I'm not hungry.
Yeah. One of the most powerful things people can do to benefit their health and nutrition is learn their hunger and fullness cues.
Yes.
Hands down, I'd say that's number 1 or 2 on the list if I were to triage my efforts. Like, what would you do first or second? I'd say start to get them connected to when they're hungry and when they're satisfied. That is...
It's huge.
Your body wisdom. Yeah, you can't go wrong when you can really tap into your body wisdom. And I think the more we ignore that and those cues and we look for these external rules and regulations, the more disconnected we get and the more we don't trust our bodies and we look for rules and it gets into that diet cycle.
God, you are brilliant. What you just said, look for external, whatever you just said, because I want to be taking notes, but I want to be listening. Because one of my questions was, how do you feel about the weighing and measuring programs? I don't feel they're sustainable. I have no evidence they work when people do them, but every time I get a client from it saying, but I was so hungry, no other species in nature weighs and measures their food. But if you're not eating the right food, you probably have to. So I just want to say, I want to just grab and give you a big hug and kiss. And thank you for agreeing with me and validating what I believe. And if I was rich, I would just steal you away from whatever company you work for and just make you do all the consults, because I get tired of saying the same thing to people. Yeah. So thank you. You know what I think, though, part of the reason, because we're going to talk a little bit later, one of your things is about the emotional aspect. But I think one of the reasons people became so disconnected to their hunger cues is because they're not eating the right diet. When all you eat is processed food and animal products with no satiety, with no water, with no fiber, you're never going to feel full. And I think that's part of the reason. So, God, you are wise beyond your years, Ryan Andrews. Okay, so chapter 2, which was one of my favorites because of the cartoon. And I wish I had this book when I was fat, seriously. Unfortunately, I got it after I had slimmed down, but it's so true. Because everything you're saying so far has been true for me, or at least when I was fat. Fat people eat haphazardly and fast. And my mom always used to say, where's the fire? Slow down, slow down.
Yeah, I like to look at how someone is eating before I look at what they're eating. I think in America, we really want to look at macronutrients and calories and added sugars and all the detailed stuff. And that can potentially come into play maybe, but I'm really concerned with how mindful are they when they're sitting down to a meal? Are they paying attention? Are they driving to work when they're eating? Are they on the train? Are they eating really fast? Are they eating really slow? Just the process of eating, that tells me a lot about where somebody is at with their nutrition, because time and time again, you see somebody who's eating a fairly nutritious diet, but they still haven't quite addressed this, and they're just having trouble addressing their hunger and fullness cues, and they're like, oh, I can't figure out why I'm eating more nutritious foods. Well, maybe it's because you're not paying attention when you're eating too fast, eating while you're driving to work, all that stuff.
Well, everybody eats with this now, and this is the problem. Right. And they're on Facebook, and they're on the phone, and you're so if people just, like I said, did everything, every chapter heading, they would be slim, honestly. It's amazing. So, number 3, we touched on it briefly, and I agree with you. Fat people count calories, and you could add probably weigh and measure their food. I know how many calories I eat now because people say, well, how much do you eat? Because I eat a lot. I eat more now as slim because I understand calorie density, but I never counted. I mean, I can't, who has time for that,
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to reduce food down to calories. I mean, food offers so much. And when we just simply measure it by calories, or the calories we think it provides, because there are so many variables that go into how many calories are actually in that food and how many we're actually going to absorb and utilize in the body. I don't know. I think it's unfair to reduce food down to just calories. Plus, related to the next chapter of dieting, when you're
Right.
hyper focused on calories, you get into the scarcity mindset. And anybody operating from a scarcity mindset, whether it's with calories and food or money or anything, it puts that top of mind. So we're obsessed about calories, and food and calories come top of mind, and that's all we can pay attention to and think about.
Right. Because the next chapter was fat people go on diets, and I'll tell you, overweight people have been on more diets than anybody else in the world, right? But diets don't work, so yeah.
Yeah, whenever anybody mentions they're thinking about doing some sort of a diet, and when I say diet, I'm obviously not talking about somebody who's really working towards deep behavior changes with their life and nutrition, but like, hey, I saw something in a magazine and I'm going to try it for a week or two. That they'd probably be better off just not doing anything in the long term. At least they'd maybe be stable rather than this temporary drop and then a spike back up.
Right.
So yeah, diets are bad news.
I find it so interesting that people go back to diets when they know they don't work. I think it was something like, there's something called the National Weight Control Registry that tracks people. And I believe the statistic was that 98% of people that go on a diet gain it all back within 2 years, something like 66% within the first year, 22% within the second year. And I remember I had this client today, and she had done every single diet, and she had the most success when she was doing like a McDougall program, a starch-based diet. And so I said, well, then do that, because my program, Ultimate Weight Loss, is a little bit more restrictive. It deals with food addiction. I always tell people, this is the last stop on the train. If you can just do a less restrictive program and get the results, do it. Don't come to me. But she said, well, I'm thinking of going back and doing this strict weighing and measuring program. And I said, well, how did it work for you when you did it? She goes, oh, it was terrible. I was hungry all the time, and I ended up binging on non-compliant food. So I'm thinking, you just said it didn't work, but now you're going to go back to it, because people really believe, because people that don't really understand the science of weight loss, like yourself, that the only way to lose weight is to eat less and exercise more. And that's not true.
Yeah, it's very well-educated people, bright people who are really trying to do their body and their life good, believe that the solution is to go on a fad diet. And it's something I want to go on the rooftops and shout and like post everywhere on billboards. Like, this is not the way to long-term health and weight management.
Oh my God, you're so passionate. You know so much. How can I get you out talking about this in the world? I know you said you want to work with children now, but unless they're overweight children, we need you to be talking about this, Now, chapter 5, the heading I especially love, because 7 years ago I wrote a book called Unprocessed, and that is Fat People Eat Processed Food. Yep.
Yeah, maybe it is a surprise to some people, but if you go to the grocery store right now and look at somebody's grocery cart, there's a good chance about 60% of it is going to be highly processed food. So highly processed foods are making up the majority of most Americans' diets. And that I'm talking about, chips and muffins and cookies and crackers and all the highly processed stuff. Not like rolled oats and lentils and things like that. So, these foods, you mentioned this earlier, it's really hard to pay attention to those hunger and fullness cues when you're eating these foods engineered to be consumed and really not elicit any type of fullness. Whenever anybody asks, Ryan, I'm always hungry, what's the best appetite suppressant? That best appetite suppressant is real food.
Yeah, food that has
that
fiber.
Will make you feel satisfied.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because weighing and measuring unhealthy food, just eating less, it's like trying to breathe less. You'll starve or you'll suffocate. And I love that you said about when you look in people's shopping carts, because I believe it's something like Americans eat something like 67 to 72% of their calories now from processed foods. And I know some junk food vegans that eat 100% of their calories from processed food. And my favorite game to play in the grocery store is I don't look at the person, I look at the cart, and I think of a number in my head, because I can almost always guess their weight range by seeing what's in the cart. And when it's fruits and vegetables and sweet potatoes and beans, love it. It's so cool that you figured this out so young and not even as an overweight person. But I guess when all the people you work with, just as an aside here, have you ever watched that show, My 600-Pound Life?
No.
But you've heard of it. You've heard of it, right? So it's a show on TLC where a doctor in Houston does gastric bypass surgery to the super morbidly obese. And what's interesting is if you watch that show and just do the opposite, you would be lean, because that is all they eat. First of all, most of them are in bed and they're being enabled by somebody that's giving them these like 10,000 calories a day to sustain an 800-pound body. But it's like, it's always the food you said. There's always soda involved. There's always fast food involved, chips, animal products. You don't see a single fruit or vegetable on the show. And when you see a starch like a potato, it's deep fried. So,
Right.
I mean, it's just incredible. Fat people, no, chapter 7, eat mostly animal proteins. Like we said on that show, that's what they're eating. Yeah.
Yeah, people consume about 225 pounds of meat and dairy foods per year, and we consume about 7 pounds of beans per year. So forget absolutes, just thinking about a more even distribution of where we're getting our protein. I mean, 225 pounds to 7 pounds is not even remotely balanced. So, I mean, if somebody could just say, you know what, one meal a day or a few meals a week, I'm going to make legumes or beans my protein source for the meal, I mean, that would have major repercussions for health and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. And you know, just based on sheer caloric density, animal protein is more than twice as calorically dense as plant protein generally, calorie per calorie. And
Right.
and that's where calories actually do matter. If somebody like wanted, not that I want people to count calories, but if they understood caloric density, they'd know that meat, you know, averages 1,000 calories a pound or more, and you know, potatoes are 400. So again, it's math. I so agree with you on chapter 8, because this is why I stayed fat, even though I was drinking a, quote, healthy green smoothie every morning. Fat people drink calories.
Yeah, it kind of blows me away. I guess I do live in a little bit of a bubble world sometimes, but beyond smoothies, people drink a lot of soda and juice and coffee drinks with a lot of added sugars, and it blows me away that that's a regular part of their daily routine. And that, I mean, it's not offering anything, and it's extra energy intake that the body has to deal with, and it usually doesn't deal with it in a healthy way. So, I mean, this is kind of one of those things, along with hunger and fullness cues, like if you can really address the calories you're drinking, that could really go a long way for a lot of people.
And again, I'm not saying that green smoothies are unhealthy, but what you talked about when you're talking about just satiety, the ability to feel full, especially on fewer calories. When I went to True North as a patient in January of 2011, I was drinking a green smoothie that was, if you had to figure it out, maybe 400 calories a day, perfect, healthy ingredients. There was kale and blueberries and bananas and flax seeds and almond milk. That wasn't the problem. But the way they explained it to me, Dr. Doug Lyle said that when you get home from True North, I want you to put all the ingredients for your green smoothie in your blender. But instead of pushing the button, pour it in a bowl. And when I tried to eat the half a pound of kale and the 2 cups of blueberries, I got full about the halfway point. And so, again, it's not that, like, especially for athletes or children or people that won't eat fruits and vegetables, I'm not bashing green smoothies, but for weight loss, the liquid calories just don't have the same amount of satiety. And it's so much easier that when the blender artificially reduces the volume that you can chug it down, whereas if you actually had to eat it and chew it, you'd burn some calories in the chewing and the digesting, and you would really feel those satiety signals. Because it's like Dr. Esselstyn says, we didn't exit our mother's womb clutching the sharp blades of a Vitamix. There's no blenders in nature, and we already have 32 of them. So, and like you're right, it's not just smoothies, it's soda is like the biggest culprit, especially a lot of times in children. And these designer coffee drinks, I mean, they could have 800 calories, you know, in a macchiato, you know, I don't know, but there's these drinks
Right.
that, you know, with the whipped cream and the chocolate. So yeah, cool. And also the other thing with green smoothies, I mean, some people, their green smoothie is 1 leaf of kale and then coconut oil and cacao nibs and, you know, peanut butter, and then that's a whole different ball game than a green smoothie. So great. And as a chef, I couldn't agree with you more. Chapter 10, fat people don't have basic food preparation skills.
Yeah, I try to get into schools periodically and do, I mean, you know this better than anybody, but I try to get into schools and just do some very basic food demos for students, junior high usually. And I mean, students really have no basic skills. I'm not talking about, you know, making a quiche or something.
Right,
like
exactly.
steaming vegetables or baking potatoes or sweet potatoes, like cooking lentils. They don't know how to do it. They don't even know how to prepare a salad sometimes. So, yeah. I mean, these are just fundamental life skills that have unfortunately gone bye-bye over the last 20, 30, 40 years. So it's one of those things. I think the more we can get this stuff back into ideally schools, that'd be great. And it's just like, balancing your money and your income versus what you spend. Like, you just need to learn this stuff. So
Absolutely.
It goes a long way.
I know, instead of teaching archaic things like, have you ever used trigonometry like in your life ever?
Probably not. Not that I can recall.
When I think about the stuff I had to learn in high school that I struggled with being dyslexic, like the algebra, the geometry, the trigonometry, the calculus, the math analysis, where I had to get a tutor. I've never once been called upon in life for that, or I've never been once asked, what date a historic battle took place. So like you say, things like managing your money, learning these life skills, because when I was in 7th grade, that was 1971, that was the last year they had home economics in public school. Yeah. And that was actually a useful class where they actually taught us how to sew and taught us how to cook. And you're so right. I had a client recently, an overweight female, 44 years old, and she came to my house because I do, like you said, with the children, I show some things, and she said, could you please tell me how to bake a potato? And I thought she was joking, because you could even just microwave it. And it is very sad that we have gotten so far away from, like you say, what should be a basic life skill. Even Dr. Alan Goldhammer knows how to make steamed vegetables and brown rice, and he has a chef that can do this. So very cool. And I agree with that 100%. And again, you don't have to be a gourmet cook, but you have to know how to make a few meals that you're going to enjoy. Now, this is really going to be interesting because one of my questions to you was going to be about a diet and exercise, because I've heard things like, I heard Dr. Furman last week speak in Vegas, and he says you can't outrun your mouth, which I love, because before that, John Joseph, the triathlete, I believe that's what it's called, said you can't out exercise a bad diet. But you say that fat people exercise fewer than 4 hours a week. So talk a little bit about exercise and weight loss, because my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that exercise isn't quite as important to the weight loss process for the weight loss. It's important for other reasons: bone health, brain health, cognitive health, to give you the self-esteem so that you stick to your healthy eating. But I thought it was more important where it actually came into weight management. So talk a little bit about that, because that's one of my questions.
Yeah, a couple points with this one. Somebody's body weight in general, to me, I always think of it as a byproduct of how they're living. So you're on point in terms of talking about, if you're reducing exercise down to just how many calories you burn on physical activity and then looking at consumption and trying to make sense of it and how it determines weight long term, I'm not really into that. And if you get as controlled as you can with that, it doesn't look great. But in terms of everything else that goes along with physical activity and movement, whether it's psychological, just feeling better, whether it's cardiovascular benefits. And if I had to change a word in the title, I would change this to not exercise, but just movement.
Thank you. That's our mutual friend John Pierre loves to use that word. He never uses the E word. He always says movement, just sneaking it in throughout the day.
Yeah, movement, I kind of relate this to hunger and fullness cues. Like, most people enjoy some sort of movement. Imagine like being cooped up on a plane. You want to get out and kind of move and walk around and stretch. It feels good. But I think for a lot of reasons, we have a negative association with movement because it becomes kind of this, boot camp, hardcore bodybuilding culture of movement is pain and suffering and sacrifice. And that's unfortunate because it can really be an enjoyable thing you do on a regular basis to just get around or with friends, and it just has all these benefits. So yeah, there's a lot of deep-rooted stuff with that one in terms of how people perceive movement and exercise and all the potential benefits. But yeah, I think for somebody to really be healthy and feel good and manage weight, you got to just move. You got to move on some level.
And I couldn't agree with you more. It was our mutual friend John Pierre that got me moving, because I was a non-exerciser until about the age of 52. I'm almost 58 now. And we worked together in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, and we would tell people that they needed to eat vegetables for not just weight loss, but for health. And they would say, well, I hate vegetables. And I'd say, suck it up. You're a grown-up. Just do it. And so John Pierre said to me, well, when are you going to start exercising? I said, well, I'm thin. I don't need to exercise. I hate exercise. He says, do you know how ridiculous you sound? And so I did hate it at first. And so when I started 5 years ago, I just chose the exercise I hated the least. But now I'm like, I really am addicted. And it's like when I can't exercise because, like you say, I'm on a plane or maybe for whatever, there's certain maybe I'm in a conference or whatever and I can't do much, it's like, because for me as a person with a history of anxiety, and exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant and anti-anxiety medicine. And for just that reason alone, even if I still was heavy, I would do it now because of the amazing brain benefits. And it's interesting because there's this popular weighing and measuring program out there now that tells people don't exercise while you're dieting, it'll deplete willpower. And all the experts that I talk to, like Dr. Doug Lisle, say, if anything, it gives you more willpower. It gives you the self-esteem to feel good, especially when done early in the day, and it actually makes it easier for you to stick to your healthy eating plan, because you could eat, like you were saying, good all day. You could be eating a pretty good diet and still blow it with a 2,000 calorie binge at night. But once you've exercised in the morning, nothing takes that away, and that I think is such a great foundation. But if you notice that, like, sometimes people really are very overweight or obese, and it's not easy sometimes for them to do any kind of movement, or maybe they're in a wheelchair. So how would you address that? Because that can be a concern at certain points in people's recovery process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I guess two parts. One would be just finding a list or coming up with a list of things you can do. And, I mean, depending on the level of extra weight somebody's carrying, it might be, chair exercises and arm circles and chair yoga or something with bands.
But there's always something. Is the idea?
Yeah, there is. And anybody who's been injured, I mean, you have to kind of start from square one sometimes. I mean, no matter whether it's weight or injuries, like, you got to do some exercise. They don't look maybe cool, or like they wouldn't make the cover of Men's Health, but they benefit you, and that's where you need to start, and that's completely fine. The other part of that answer would be prevention. Like, the more you can do early in life to just keep a healthy body and a healthier weight to hopefully prevent getting to a point where you just can't do anything would be ideal.
It's so funny that you said that, because before I became a chef, I was an activity director at a retirement home. And so these are people that probably were born in the 20s, and I don't think it was fashionable for people to exercise back then. And they're some of the most debilitated people because of a whole lifetime of inactivity. Even though they may not be overweight, most of them have dementia or Alzheimer's. But the big thing is they cannot get up out of a chair. They cannot get up out of a toilet, and it's really sad to see what happens to people from a lifetime of inactivity.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean, I was telling you before the call, like, I come from a background of bodybuilding, and that for anybody who has kind of come from the fitness culture, looking at exercise and movement in a way of helping us stay functional into old age and adapting chair exercises for people carrying extra weight, it's kind of an anticlimactic thing when you're squatting like 400 pounds in a gym. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that is really like the stuff that matters. It's such a short window of your life when you can do these extraordinary feats with athletics. And then it's really about feeling good, staying pain injury free, and staying functional. Like, that's where I'm only in my mid 30s, and that's what it's all about for me right now. It's like, forget about that.
I could be your mom. I can't believe it. You're so young. But what you said out of the mouth of babes, oft time come gems, is one of the most profound things. That it's not just about, looking good and being thin, which you will be if you listen to you or listen to me, but it's about staying functional till old age. And that is really the selling point, I think, because most people spend the last few years of their life in such a state of debility and disability. Like, I think about the way my parents died, just on ventilators and on 17 medications. And it's, while we cannot guarantee that you will live longer if you eat the way we say and exercise the way we say, it is about not having those last years be disabling and being functional, because you don't want to be in a nursing home with somebody wiping your ass, as Dr. Goldhammer says, and you can avoid that if they would listen to you and listen to me. So just out of curiosity, you're not bodybuilding now, but I'm guessing you probably do exercise, so what do you like to do? Like, what does Ryan do all day long?
Yeah, it's changed a bit over the years. Definitely, I'm very far away from what a bodybuilder looks like and how they train. But I try to keep it interesting and enjoyable and fun. I like lifting weights. I don't do it more than 3 days a week because my joints can only handle about 3 days a week based on all my previous years. It's like 3 days a week of some sort of strength training is good. Like 1 or 2 days of some sort of gentle yoga is really good for me. I
love yoga. What kind of yoga do you do? Because you're a yoga teacher, right?
Yeah. I've done a lot of different types. I like to practice gentle restorative yoga myself.
That's my favorite, yin and restorative. God, can't you move here? I love you. I do. I don't know why people don't know you and why you're not on every speaking circuit. You're so exceptional. We could do yoga together. Please leave Boston. It's so cold there.
I gotta head west.
It's 95 today.
Yoga. I like the gentle restorative yoga. It's a nice
balance.
Complement to it's a nice balance to kind of turn away from the mirrors and breathe and listen. I think just breathing for a while is quite beneficial. And I walk and bike a lot to get around. It's good for my body, good for the environment. So I try to do that as much as I can.
It's so interesting that you mentioned restorative yoga, because when people say, well, I'm too high of a weight, because a lot of times maybe they don't want to put a bathing suit on to go to the pool. I can understand that. But in my restorative yoga class, there have been some very, very, very overweight people, like really, like you would maybe even say morbidly obese, because the thing is in restorative yoga, as long as you can get on the floor and get off the floor, you can do it. And I've seen people in the class wearing oxygen masks, if they have oxygen, because and you can get videos free online for restorative, because like you said, we talked about how overweight people are not in touch with their hunger and satiety signals, partly because they're eating foods that never will make them full and satisfied. That I think yoga helps you get in touch with your body and your breathing, and I think that I have so many friends that's just cardio weights, and it's like, Shada, if you're watching, this girl that lost 100 pounds on the Ultimate Weight Loss Program that exercises like crazy, but there's nothing to balance it. Like you say, the yoga is so important, and for me, that's where I started. I started with the yoga. And then I went on to spinning and walking. I always did. So very good. So this next chapter heading, this is the one that some people might not like, but it's fat people are lazy. So I know you're going to explain what you mean by that, because
it's hard not to be lazy in America for everybody, no matter your body size. Really, I mean, the default is not moving and not cooking and not really doing anything. Looking at the kind of physical activity side of things, we don't have to move at all. We can drive everywhere. We can take elevators and escalators. We don't have to wash our cars or clean our houses. Like, we can really not move at all, which I would consider somewhat lazy. And it's the default. And then with food, like, we can order everything already prepared. We can get frozen microwave meals or go to fast food, and so we have to do no food prep or no any food preparation, which I would consider somewhat lazy.
Yeah.
And so it's not. I wouldn't say that, oh, you're lazy, you're a bad person. It's just like the default in America is laziness. You have to go out of your way and make it a point to not be lazy. I'm going to walk to the store. I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to buy my food and prepare it at home. Like, that's not the norm. You have to go out of your way to do it. So I don't blame people for falling into this. It's what happens.
Right. Are you familiar with the book? It's same publisher as your book, called The Pleasure Trap by Goldhammer and Lyle.
Yeah, I read that. It's great.
The motivational triad: seek energy, avoid pain, and conserve energy. And so by not exercising, and like you say, now you can order all your groceries online. You can order all your food. You literally, like, there was a cartoon movie called Wall-E. I don't know if you remember it, where the people were just huge, and they were in these recliners drinking sodas. Like, they never moved at all. And it's true. It's so easy to fall into that, because like now, when in the old days, we'd have to get out of the car and get gas, and now, or at least walk inside to pay. Now you pay at the pump, and
it's everything.
The same thing with the bank. Like, I can drive through the bank, and like the drive-through restaurant, now the bank. So you literally don't ever have to. You could actually not move at all if you wanted to. So that's pretty interesting. Yep. So this one, chapter 13, Dr. Goldhammer will especially like and agree with you. Fat people don't get enough sleep.
Yeah, gosh, what can't you say about sleep right now? It influences so many things. And I guess specific to weight management, there are obvious things. When you don't sleep well, you usually don't feel very good, and you probably don't want to stay active. You probably don't care that much about going grocery shopping and preparing food. It's just you don't feel good. And then on a deeper level, there is a whole host of things happening with hunger hormones getting out of whack in your body, so you think you're hungry when you're not, and your gut microbiome getting out of whack. Like, everything completely goes off the charts when you're just not regularly sleeping. So it's one of those things, like, it needs to be taken seriously. And when people use it as a badge of honor, like, I get by with this many hours of sleep and I'm fine. It's like, I don't know. I think it's something to address and obviously find what works best for you, but it's there.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. Dr. Goldhammer, I talked to him today. He says diet, sleep, exercise, diet, sleep, exercise. And, I find that a lot of the people that I work with that are overweight or obese, they eat very late at night. And this is the next chapter that you have, which is fat people use food to manage their feelings. What I found is that, yes, absolutely true, and that this is generally taking place in the evening. So a lot of times they can eat fairly good all day, and they're busy with their job, they're not medicating with food, but then they come home and they're either lonely or tired, and that when they eat late in the night, it really messes up their sleep. And so let's talk about first the chapter heading fat people use foods to manage their feelings, because I'm guessing you don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very aware of it, I think, when it's happening, and I try to minimize it. This is one of those things it's very tough to I get very emotionally invested in a lot of clients I work with who are struggling with a lot of deep emotional things, whether it's early trauma, current trauma, but something is happening in their lives that doesn't quite match up with maybe what they want or what they value, what they expect, and they've somehow developed using food as a way to numb the pain they're feeling or distract themselves or something. And I think sometimes we might recognize this in our lives and we try to fix it with a surface level nutrition fix. So we say, all right, I'm struggling with my job or relationships and I'm eating and it's not healthy. I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to count calories. I'm going to weigh my food. That'll fix it.
Nope.
That's like a Band-Aid over a massive wound. So to get to addressing the fundamental feelings and traumas and issues, there's no magical formula. I mean, it can often require therapy, big life changes that are uncomfortable. So it's something that's tough for me because I get invested in clients and it requires changes. Sometimes they're not ready to make changes, and I have to be okay with that. You can't force somebody into making big life changes. But I mean, the good news, I guess, about these uncomfortable life events is that they're going to be there no matter what. So we can address them or not address them, but they're going to be kind of festering. So, kind of choose how you want to address it moving forward.
Right. And so do you refer them to somebody to get these kind of
help?
Or,
Yeah, I mean, very often, yes. I'm a big fan of some sort of therapy. I know sometimes therapy kind of has baggage along with it, but whether that's a life coach or a psychotherapist or anybody who you can kind of talk to and work through things and process and try things, I think it's worth it to do that. I mean, it's a process. I think everybody, no matter even if you're like, I have an obvious life problem, I think we can all benefit from it on some level.
I swear, it's like I'm looking in the mirror. Everything that comes out of your mouth is what I think in my head, and what I don't know how two people in two different parts of the world could just come to all these same, I was going to say conclusions, but truth. So would you agree, though, that regardless of what they're eating, that night eating isn't the best thing, eating after dinner?
I mean, if somebody notices that pattern, I think there's probably some things going on there. Maybe it's related to feelings and uncomfortable truths in their life, or they're not eating enough all day and they have just a lot of hunger along with the uncomfortable. Yep. So it's like this mix of bad things you don't want happening. And then it leads to the whole cascade, like I talked about earlier, where they eat a lot, they're uncomfortable, they don't sleep well, they're not hungry the next morning, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, I find that when people just exclude entire healthy food groups like starch, like the potatoes, rice, and beans, and are either weighing and measuring, or whereas a lot of things, the biggest problem I have with the weighing and measuring programs, other than the actual insanity of weighing and measuring, is that a lot of them will tell you no starch, and then they're so hungry that this is what happens, and they have to eat at night. So thank you. So again, I agree with you. Chapter 15, this is what I talk about ad nauseum, which is the environment. Fat people put themselves in fat-inducing situations.
Yeah, this can be, really specific to somebody's life, where just what they're keeping in their pantry and fridge and the people they're spending time with at work and their friends. And then I step back and it's more of a global thing, like I talked about earlier, we're in a country where it's a fat-inducing country. I mean, if you just kind of eat what everybody else eats and do what everybody else does, and you're going to probably be carrying a lot of extra weight. You're going to be fat. I mean, that's just what's going to happen. So you have to put yourself and create an environment that supports your values. It's tough to do.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's the alternative,
Right.
That's the truth, because I really think that if you eat like other Americans, you're going to be fat and sick like most of them. So thank you for talking about how important the environment is. We did a live webinar with Dr. Lyle just last night talking about mastering the environment, that how it really is going to predict your success. And so great. So chapter 16, fat people are all or none thinkers. So that one is not something on my list. So let's talk about that now, what you think and mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it in a few ways. I guess specific to nutrition, they get in this pattern where they're eating good or eating bad, or on the plan or off the plan,
Mm-hmm.
clean eating, cheat eating. There's all these ways we categorize it. And to me, it just completely is an unrealistic way of approaching things.
Yeah.
And it leads to the scarcity mindset. And I think it also makes us kind of, I always think of it with cheat days. So a lot of people have cheat days, and they can't wait for the cheat day because they can eat all the foods they like.
Yeah.
And to me, that just kind of feeds into the idea that I guess you don't like what you're eating the rest of the time. Like, we need to kind of come up with a way of eating that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, related to the all or none thing, I always say the decent method you follow is better than the perfect method you quit. So let's find something that's like...
that's sort of like done is more profitable than perfect. I mean, we use different words, but we have the same mindset. So absolutely.
Yeah. So find something that's not all or none, but
right.
That's pretty good, and you'll maybe do it for a long time.
Oh my God. It's sort of like my meditation teacher says, the best meditation is the one you'll actually do. So this perfect 30-minute meditation that I'm not doing doesn't serve me, but the not as good. Yeah, that's what I say, because I say this all the time. Find the least restrictive program that you enjoy and do that one, because you're right. They're either eating an F or they're eating an A, and they forget there's BCD in between. And just because you can't eat kale doesn't mean you have to eat at McDonald's. You can eat a baked potato. Boy, you are wise beyond your years. I mean, gosh, where were you when I needed this information? I would have come to you as a client, and you're amazing. So we have 2 more chapters. Chapter 17, fat people focus on short-term gain, literally.
Yeah, I think of this one in a few ways. I guess I'll focus on, a lot of times when it comes to this whole topic of weight and nutrition changes and exercise changes, we're very focused on today and tomorrow and this week. Like, I want to weigh in and I have to lose a few pounds this week. And I think it's worth talking to people about the long-term view. And I know that's not, it's not sexy and fun and cool to talk about, but if we can really get clear on what we care about and our values and figure out a way of life that matches up with those values, I mean, that's a great formula and a great way to live. So if you can take kind of a longer term perspective with things and think about, gosh, I want to live my life this way, and that'll probably benefit me in the long term. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's I think, pretty empowering when you can kind of figure that stuff out.
Right. Yeah. And like, I'm going back to what you said about forgetting about the look. It's like about being functional. And to me, that is like so, I'm almost 60 and I don't have kids to take care of me, and I don't have long-term health insurance. And so when I think about it, it's like they say you have to find your why. Like, I'll have people like, well, why do you want to lose weight? I'm like, I don't know. But it's like being healthy to me is so much more inspiring than being skinny. And to face a life not in a nursing home, not in a hospital bed, to me, like, what could be better than that? It's sure better. I'd rather, not eat some crap food today so that I can have that in the future. So very good. So the last it's not the last chapter, but it's the last chapter of this type, says that, and this is really interesting, because this is where I see people struggling the most, because everybody can lose weight. Everybody that's ever wanted to lose weight has lost weight. And there's healthy ways, like the way you and I recommend, with proper diet, eating the right food, moving the body, and then, you could take cocaine, you could have gastric bypass, you can, do all kinds of crazy things. But you're saying, and I have seen this, that fat people get overconfident with their weight management skills. Yeah,
and it's exactly to the point you just mentioned. I mean, you can lose weight a lot of different ways. I mean, there are countless restrictive diet approaches, and you can lose weight. I don't know if it's a good idea, but you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what? You know, to find people that have maintained a healthy weight for a long time, that's very rare.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I meet people like that, like, I want to know what they're doing. Like, tell me
Right.
your wisdom and what you're doing to live this way, because that's the good stuff. So I think, and again, it kind of relates to what I talked about earlier. You're not going to get much support in this country right now, because the way of life for most people doesn't support what you want to achieve. So enlisting support, whether it's a therapist or nutritionist, life coach, trainer, whatever, new friends, just enlisting support that kind of keeps you aligned with your values is powerful.
Right. And I think the mistake that, like this client today that said, well, I'm going to go back to weighing and measuring, even though it didn't work for me, which it may work while you do it, but it's not sustainable. It's like, if you don't find a program that you enjoy, like, I don't need a cheat day because my food is so good. I think you only need a cheat day when you're eating, like you say, food that you don't like. And when you're eating nourishing things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, as much as you want, you don't have to have a cheat day, because every day is just delicious. But I find that people do these restrictive programs that work while they're doing them, but because they're not sustainable, they end up falling off, gaining back probably more weight than they even lost. And like you say, losing weight is easy. I'm at almost my 6-year mark after, and it's like, there's times I think, like, is this real? But like, I follow everything in your book is so spot on. So you're awesome, but you can't take a client right now, right? Your life is changing, because where were you 5 years ago? I wouldn't have had to start the Ultimate Weight Loss Program. I would have just said, go to Ryan, because he has all the answers.
Jeez, I don't have all the answers,
but you have a lot. You have a lot
to...
of the answers. And by the way, this book, Drop the Fat Act and Live Lean, it's available on Amazon, anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, any major bookstore you can get it.
Right.
Order it online.
And
you can read.
Half the proceeds are donated to, say again, the organization.
Yeah, half of my author proceeds to hunger relief efforts and school lunch programs, to a couple different nonprofits. But yeah, you can check out my books. I have an ebook on my website about.
It's free, tell people what your website is, and if they wanted to get in touch with you, how they would get in touch with you.
Yeah, RyanDAndrews.com, and you'll find a free ebook there, A Guide to Plant-Based Eating. I just published that earlier this year, I believe, or maybe the end of last year. And check it out. It's some of my latest thoughts on how to eat a plant-based diet, and why it matters.
We're almost out of time, but I'll be honest, I downloaded the book, but it was too hard to read on this, so I want to read it again, and maybe I could have you back, because you're just so inspiring to talk to, and we could talk about your next book, which would be really cool. Just the last couple of questions, just for fun. What's your favorite thing to eat? What do you love to eat?
Gosh, I eat a lot of peanut butter sandwiches.
Yeah. Okay.
I love peanut butter sandwiches on good whole grain bread.
That's cute. That's great. And who in your life has inspired you the most? And it doesn't have to be somebody in the medical or plant-based world. It could be your grandpa, just because I feel like I didn't get to know you as well, because I wanted to talk about the book. But who made Ryan Andrews so brilliant at such a young age? Somebody must have inspired you.
Wow. Geez. I've been inspired by so many people in my life so far. If I had to pick one up to this point that inspired me in a lot of ways at some key points in my life, I might say Victoria Moran. Just some of her books, and I did some coaching with her, and it just seemed to be she said the right stuff at a time I needed to hear it, and so it was very helpful in my life.
Well, she's an awesome Aries just like me, and I'm sure she's going to be very touched that you said that, and I might even tell her in advance of the interview, because that's lovely. So very good. Well, this hour felt like 5 minutes. I could talk to you all day, and I love the idea of reading your new book and then interviewing you on that, because that's what you're doing now. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for writing a book that I really enjoyed. And again, if no other reason, just for the cartoons, and that he's donating half the money to hunger relief. So thank you so much, Ryan Andrews, and thanks all of you to watching another episode of Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious. Thanks, everyone.